Hello, everyone there in the Zoom land, or what some people think of as the Zoom dollar. And welcome, you guys here as well in the room. Um, so this evening I'm going to talk a little bit about Stupa, and it's like when you approach talking about or listening to anything that pertains to the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. What I'll say is kind of forming your mindset is kind of important, I think, particularly here, or like I say, where we're talking about the stupas and the mind of enlightenment, enlightened mind, or Buddha mind. Kind of a sense of humility might be a good place to start, certainly from my side anyway. And a kind of looseness or openness of heart. We're very kind of fixated. You guys in Zoom land are fixated on the screen, which I guess is good. But to really appreciate the stupa, it takes a certain kind of softening of the senses, softening of the heart, kind of looseness and openness to it all. And then the stupa comes alive, yeah. So as much as we can kind of have that approach, I think that would be good. And the stupa, in Sanskrit, in Tibetan, they say chorten. And chorten, the first part is the chut, which is the practice of offering, right? Which is one of the seven main practices of Bodhisattva, homage, and all these different things. But the offerings is a big part of Buddhist practice. And so, the presence of a stupa is almost like an open invitation to that practice. So when we approach a stupa, it would be totally appropriate to offer 3 prostrations, for example, or to offer a vase of flowers or some incense, or if there's a little donation box to, put something in the donation box, because it takes funds to make these things and to maintain them, and so on. So that's the chut, so it's basically the offering is a sense of generosity and devotion. Buddha and the Buddha mind that the stupa represents, and to its lineage, teachings from the Buddha down to our present time. And then the second part of chorten is ten, and ten means to support. So it's kind of the stupa is acting as a support. You might even say like a open receptacle, for the offerings. The offerings can land somewhere, and so chorten in Tibetan is how the stupa is expressed. And so it is, this is somewhat difficult, maybe difficult, again, going back to sort of a looseness of approach. The stupa itself is the fact that you are in the presence of a stupa. You're bringing your awareness to the presence of the stupa or other sacred form, is a very sort of special, auspicious situation, you might say. Tendril, auspicious arising. You and the stupa arise together. This is happening all the time. There you are, listening to me. Here I am talking. We come together. We both. It doesn't work. If you're just sitting there and I'm not talking, or if I'm talking and you're not sitting there, it doesn't work, right? You both arise together, yeah. And so similarly, the stupa and us, arise together. And there's a certain oneness quality there, and it's really super special, actually. The presence of the stupa in maybe sort of more esoteric language is the actual expression in Nirmanakaya form of the enlightened mind. We talk about three kayas, the open expanse of and empty essence, and the luminous nature, and then the dynamic, the expression of compassion. And really, the stupa is just that expression of the Buddha's wisdom and compassion in our moment, right? There it is. We're with it, and so like this is a satsang, right? And this is I'm using that. I can't take you into the exact presence of a stupa, so I'm putting this in your presence. And this tata is, in a sense, a sort of miniature stupa, but also the way this is formed with the mold in the clay. There's actually 8 stupas around here. No way to hold this up super close, but if you ever come here to the Nyingma Institute, you'll see this. And then it has the Om Ye Dharma mantra around the bottom, and the very nice lotus petals of compassion at the bottom, and of course it rises up to the top. So that's what I can do. Yes.
Okay, now is that a tsatsa or is it a stupa?
Well, it's a satsa. We call it a satsa because it is, but it's actually it's kind of both in a sense, right? It has a stupa form to it, but actually on this middle level, there's actual. After class, you can look at this more closely,
Okay.
but you'll see that there's 8 stupas.
Duplicate shapes of this?
Well, I'll talk about the 8 shapes, or the
Oh.
8 different kinds of stupas in a moment.
Because there's quite a few of them in the room, and
Yeah.
I'm very glad to be able to identify it. And Robert introduced us to that
Last week, yeah.
last week, and so I was just trying to. I thought the stupa had the more slender spiral tone to
right.
it, but
We'll get
you're
there.
clarifying
We'll
for me.
get there.
Thank you.
But my point is that actually, I mean, one can live a human life and never encounter a stupa or a satsang, some sort of miniature stupa. And so that coming together actually is something really to kind of appreciate or even celebrate. It's really something quite special. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about maybe the history of, it's basically, when you have a great important person, there's a cultural tendency to want to kind of memorialize this person. And in olden times, in India and elsewhere, of course, you would have a burial mound, in sort of early civilization times, something very simple, just sort of a mounded, raised earth kind of thing. And that's about as far as it went. And then gradually cultures developed, and the people that went really hog wild in this direction were, of course, the Egyptians and the pharaohs and their golden tombs and their, stone pyramids, that are, still can be seen today, right? And so it's like, you want to remember Pharaoh number 1 or whichever Pharaoh it might be, and the stupa is like that in the sense of being a reminder, a sort of symbolic reminder of, in this case, the Buddha, as well as in certain cases, his great disciples, Arhats, or great Bodhisattvas, or Vidyadhara, masters of the lineage, um, all can be sort of memorialized in some way through the creation of the stupa. So I brought up on the PowerPoint here the Mahabodhi temple and stupa at Bodh Gaya, and so this marks the spot, if you will, of the Buddha's enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. Yeah, 600 BC, 500 BC, something like that. And so you have the temple there, and then at the very top you have kind of what you were talking about, this sort of slender coming to a real apex deal, a stupa sitting on top of a stupa, if you will, and then you can see down here to the sides, little corner stupas. So there's like stupa square. It's lots of stupas happening. And just in passing to note, you'll see this beautiful gold up here. Tartar Rinpoche, our teacher, sponsored that. His son-in-law, Richard Dixie, coordinated that project. So we have that now for everybody to enjoy. Whoever comes to Bodh Gaya can appreciate that. And then, of course, Buddhism begins this gradual spread and expansion, particularly to the north. We see in Nepal, this stupa here is the stupa at Swayambhanath, which is a hillside overlooking the Kathmandu Valley. And again, Tartar Rinpoche, this time with his youngest daughter acting as the coordinator, Sering, totally restored the Swayambhanath stupa several years ago, and also strengthened it, which was very fortunate because just a couple of years later, the big earthquake in Nepal happened, and the Swayambhanath stupa came through the earthquake with flying colors. Hooray! Thank you, Tartar Rinpoche. Right? So you get what I'm trying to communicate is in part is that Tartar Rinpoche is really doing taking care of the nice stupa at the Mahabodhi temple, taking care of the Swayambhanath stupa. This is a big deal. Our teachers' activities in this lifetime really again and again take steps to preserve, protect, and create stupas. It's really a big part of his teaching style is the creation of sacred symbols, particularly for those of us in the West who don't have a lot of cultural background and can't read Tibetan and so on and so forth. And so the interaction with symbol is a big part of sort of Rinpoche's teaching style. And then there's three main stupas in Nepal, the Swayambhanath, and then this one, which is the great stupa at Bodhanath, the Jarung Kashor. And it's wonderful. I encourage you to go. There I am with my dear companion, Donna, at the Jarung Kashor in Bodhanath. You really need to go. It's really, really wonderful to go. I can't tell you, I don't know how old it is. Nobody seems to talk about its antiquity, but it has, and there's all these Tibetan monasteries that have sprung up around it after the hard times in Tibet. So it's really something. And I thought I'd just read very quickly. There is, at the end of the talk, I have a slide that talks about, references that you can read. But the one I really encourage everyone to read is this one, which is called The Legend of the Great Stupa. And it talks about the story of the creation of the great stupa at Bodhanath. And it also illustrates the power of aspiration prayers that one might make in the presence of such a powerful, empowered, sacred symbol. How that works karmically is a bit mysterious to almost all of us, but it does work. And so there were 4 sons that fulfilled their mother's wishes in creating this stupa there, the Bodhana stupa. And so one of the sons prays, by the merit that I have won in completing this stupa with pure heart and aspiration, may I be born as a great king and protector of Dharma in the icebound border country of savages to the north. When the power of the 5 degenerations increases in the Kali Yuga at the time of destruction and corruption, may I establish the Dharma of the Buddhas there for all time. The second swan then offered his prayer, through the merit that I have won in completing this great stupa, when my brother has been reborn as a king and protector in the icebound land of savages, and when the precious doctrine of the Buddha is being established, and the necessity arises to introduce the community of the Sangha, the foundation of the Dharma in that country, may I be born as a bhikshu who will become a great arhat in order to ordain spiritual aspirants as members of the Sangha. And the third son prays, through the merit that I have won in completing this stupa, when my 2 brothers have established the Dharma of the Buddhas in the icebound land of savages, and when the people follow the Dharma of the Buddhas, may I be born not from a woman's womb, but miraculously from the pollen bed of a lotus, destroying the succession of life and death. May I live as long as sun and moon, subduing and training gods, demons, and men alike, and subjugating all the vicious natives of that barbarous country. May I be reborn as a tantric yogin, a mantradhara, to guard the Buddha's Dharma that my brothers will establish. And later on it says, in this way, at that time, innumerable prayers were offered to the benefit of all beings, and all these aspiration prayers were granted. The eldest son, the stable hand son, who prayed for rebirth as a king, has been reborn as yourself, king and protector of Dharma, Trisam Desam. The swineherd's son, who prayed for rebirth as an abbot, has been reborn as the abbot and bodhisattva Shatirashita. And the dog keeper's son, who prayed to be reborn as a tantric yogin, has become myself, the abbot of Orgyan, the lotus-born Guru Kamasambha. So the link between this stupa and the establishment of Dharma in Tibet is like our main line. Yeah. And it illustrates this great legend of the great stupa, which in Tibetan has this wonderful title, the Chorten Chenpo, or the Great Stupa, Zharan Kashur, which is the name of the stupa, Logyu, which is sort of the annals or legend or story of the Great Stupa, Tipa Drobal, which grants liberation upon hearing. In and of itself, is so amazing, but it conveys that the meritorious action of creating a stupa, of making offerings, like I say, flowers and incense and prostrations and prayers, sometimes supplication prayers, but asking for help, which we need to do from time to time, but also these aspiration prayers, which is kind of like casting a stone into the water, to really sort of put out there into the future you want to create for yourself. And the reality, the sort of mysterious karmic reality, that sort of like an echo. Mind creates. You create your own future. Your actions, your karmic actions now create your future later in this life and lifetimes to come. So, like I say, so it's this incredible dynamic that's being activated when a practitioner with an open heart and open mind, makes prayers in the presence of these sacred forms, particularly stupas. Yowzer. Really powerful stuff. And then beyond Nepal, Buddhism, of course, comes to Tibet. This is a Thangka image of the Samye Monastery, the first monastery, Buddhist monastery, established in Tibet by the three great figures I just mentioned, King Trisam Detsen, the abbot Shantirakshita, and Mahaguru Padmasambhava. And you see in this Thangka of Samye Monastery that there are 4 stupas. So the stupa, that symbol, comes into play right in the very beginning of the real establishment of the Dharma, 8th century time, during the reign of King Trisam Detsen. And you can see here there's a white stupa, here a red stupa, and a black stupa, and a green stupa. So 4 of them. And this one is a photograph of the black one, which I think is just like really amazing. It's very unique shape. Stupas are generally consistent, in terms of like the base and the spire, and then different things kind of happen in the middle, depending on what is being commemorated. But this one, it's said that the 3 great teratones or treasure revealers found termas that were concealed here by Padmasambhava and were revealed in later centuries by these terma masters. And then this is sort of flavor. This is the big stupa at Khyantse in Tibet. And another one. It's just extraordinary. You can see that the sort of artistic development, has really gotten pretty high level by the time that these stupas are created. I mean, really, it is a combination of sacred form and high art coming into play here. And as I say, these stupas commemorate great masters. This is a photograph of the stupa at Tarda Monastery in Golok, Tibet, eastern Tibet. And this stupa commemorates one of Rinpoche's earliest teachers, Tartam Choktrul. And this one, going back to Bodhanath, this is the stupa of His Holiness Dudra Rinpoche, Jigdar Yeshe Dorje, and his wife in a smaller stupa. This is a very beautiful sort of chapel, if you will, at Bodhanath. It's kind of tucked away, and not so many people go there. But I would highly encourage you to go there too. I went there particularly because I had the great good fortune of being at Odeon when Dudra Rinpoche came. This was in the summer of 1976. Vajrasattva empowerment on those of us who were fortunate enough to be there. And so, he was the premier knowledge holder, the Didar of the Nyingma lineage during the time of great turmoil. So there it is. This is what is done. Great master passes away. Cremation ceremony is done, and then the remains are placed inside a stupa. And so, particularly for those who haven't remembered something, it's just extraordinary. It's an extraordinary kindness, actually, or compassionate gesture. To be able to, that people have gone to the trouble to create these, to keep the memory of these great masters. That's the living. Then, not only do the stupas travel to Nepal and, of course, to Tibet, but they also come here to Northern California. This is the Great Enlightenment Stupa at Odeon. It's like 115 feet tall. You can see, maybe you can see there's little humans there. They're doing some sort of maintenance work. That gives you a sense of scale. It's ginormous, and it's gold plated, gold leaf rather. And he has prayer flags draped from it, and there's bells. And so when the wind blows, the prayer flags are fluttering and the bells are ringing. And the power of the stupa is evoked even. So this was late 70s, I guess. This was first constructed, and then it's been embellished. This is another photograph of the Odeon Stupa. So, when you look at that, it's got all these sort of layers or levels to it, right? And so I want to kind of give you a sort of a guided tour of the structure of a stupa. And this is the overview, and then the next slides will sort of break it down. We'll start, to go back a little bit, the Buddha, it said, at one point, he clipped some fingernails and some hair from his own body and gave that to some people who were in his presence. And he said, I want you to make a stupa to contain these relics of mine. And the story goes that the Buddha, took his robe, and he folded it into four. So it created like four layers. And then he took his begging bowl and, he inverted it upside down, right? And then he took his walking staff, you see in the art, the Shravaka disciples, they have the bhikshus, they have these walking staffs. And so he took that and he put the staff on top as kind of showing them, make it like this, giving them, a real kind of clear instruction on what sort of the shape the stupa should take. And you see that carried forward even today. You see the base at the bottom, and then in the center, the bumpa, and then the spire that goes up above. Yeah. So the sort of the guided tour is at the bottom, or the foundation. We have 3 steps, and that is Buddha Dharma, representing Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and that is, of course, the real sort of entryway into the Buddhist path, which is taking refuge in the 3 jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And then above that, we have the throne, and then a little farther up, we have 4 layers, and these symbolize what are known as the 4 immeasurable qualities of love, compassion, joy, and equanimity, which are key to the Bodhisattva approach. And those 4 immeasurable qualities are the ground from which context for the arising of bodhicitta, mind of enlightenment, profound wish and aspiration to become a Buddha ourselves for the benefit. You also see some little figure here in the middle. I'll talk about that in a minute. You see where it starts. It starts with the 4 steps of the 4 immeasurables. It goes up through the center of the stupa. And then you get farther up, you see that center line continuing up through the bumpa, the vase, if you will. And this symbolizes 7 elements or qualities of enlightenment, which include mindfulness, awareness, diligence, joy, mental flexibility or pliancy, meditative concentration, peaceful equanimity. And then right above the bumpa, you have what's called the harmika, and this symbolizes the Noble Eightfold Path, right view, right speech, right action, and so forth. And then above that, you have these circular discs, of which there are 13. And this, when we talk about the Bodhisattva path, sometimes we talk about 10 bhumis or levels. Sometimes we talk about 13, which is what we talked about here. Sometimes we talk about 16. But here's 13. These are the ascending levels of the Bodhisattva. And they go all the way up to enlightenment, of course. And this is carried, so there's a sort of a downward parasol of compassion that just sort of protects everything. That is saying that we're all under the parasol of the Buddhist compassion. And then rising above that is the moon, again symbolizing the crescent moon, symbolizing compassion, and the sun representing wisdom. So wisdom and compassion, and then the jewel at the very, very pinnacle of the stupa, jewel. And so what's going on in terms of that line, that center line that starts at the 4 steps and passes up through the vase, pupa, and up through the 13 rings, is this is part of the empowerment process of the stupa, which involves, say, a life tree. Yeah? And so what is done is one goes out onto the land and you fell a tree. But you're mindfully aware of the orientation of the tree as it sits in nature, because that same orientation in terms of how the tree faces north, south, east, and west wants to be kept, and that orientation is maintained inside the stupa. And what you do then with the tree is, you mill it and shape it, plane it. Yeah, so it makes like an obelisk, kind of like the Washington Monument. Again, right there we have sort of the American version of the stupa right there in Washington, D.C. We have the great tower, right, and it goes up and it sort of inclines up as the 4 sides go up, and then it has a sort of pyramidal shape at the very top of the Washington Monument. That's basically the shape of the life tree that is placed inside. And then the other aspects of the empowerment of a stupa typically would include sattvas, like one would make 100,000 sattvas like this, and you would place them inside the stupa. And then the sattvas are fully empowered themselves, and so it's kind of like more and more. In fact, some of these, now that I'm thinking about it, some of these just these stupas that we helped create, back again referring to the earthquake in Nepal, they reconsecrated the main stupa, the big stupa at Bodhnath, and some of our sattvas were used in the big journey over there. Are now resident inside the Bodhnath stupa. So anyway, it's very typical to create a large number of sattvas to place inside the stupa. And at Odeon, the Odeon, you can't see it here, but the first thing to be built on the site of the Odeon stupa was a huge prayer wheel, slightly bigger than the big prayer wheel we have here in the Nyingma Institute Meditation Garden or the Pema Garden. There's a very, very big prayer wheel. They wanted Odeon slightly bigger, and the stupa is built around it or over and above it. So there's all kinds of mantric energy happening from the very heart of the base of the stupa at Odeon. So there's lots of mantras that are involved in the empowerment process, and sometimes statues are placed inside there, and certainly relics of the lineage. And so, for example, in this sort of miniature sasa, in our Nyingma lineage, there was a great master Dzogchen Shakya Zhongne. And Dzogchen, he was subsequent to Padma somehow, not many years later, really. And he was extraordinary master of the Nyingma lineage. And when he passed away, he vanished in a flash of light, and amazement of those nearby, and leaving only his robes. And so his Dzogchen's robes became an object of veneration and a relic that was kept and passed down generation after generation after generation after generation after generation, finally coming down to Dudjom Rinpoche and Jigdro Geshe Dorje, who gave a portion of that robe to Tartar Rinpoche. And when we were empowering these sattsas, it was reduced down to minuscule. So there's a minuscule part of Dzogchen's robe in each of these sattsas. So that is to say, these relics of the lineage are used to empower these sacred objects. So like I say, they're really quite special. Then, oh yeah, and so we have in the Indian Buddhist tradition the emergence of 8 different stupas. And for those of you here in the room afterwards, you can look in these cases, and there's little like 6-inch, 8-inch tall stupas there, and those show these 8 different forms. I've been talking about the Enlightenment Stupa, and that's kind of the one we're most familiar with. But there's also, and like I was saying earlier, the base is very similar, consistent, and the whole spire business and the vase or bumpa is the same. But this part in here, this one has a set of steps coming down. And when the Buddha entered into this world, he came down a ladder, basically, from the Tushita heaven and entered into our realm. And so this is the descent of the Buddha from the God realm. And there's a stupa that commemorates that event. Then there's the one with the lotuses commemorating his birth, as I recall. Then there's one that has many doors, and this is reflecting the many door, sort of the luminous doors of the Dharma. All these different teachings, everybody's different, right? And everybody has a certain aptitude and inclination. And so there's different doorways in to the Buddha Dharma or into the Buddha's realization. There's not just like one size fits all. There's many, many levels and different kinds of teachings. And so these many doors symbolize that. There was also apparently some sort of schism that had arisen in the Sangha, and the Buddha brought everybody together and made peace. So there's this reconciliation stupa, one of complete victory. There's the one of great miracles. At one point, there was a time where he Buddha demonstrated a whole host of miracles. And then the Nirvana Stupa. And here the shape is different. The bumpa or the vase is distinct. All the other ones. So, and so Rinpoche and of course other masters have continued this tradition of again and again replicating these 8. And like I said, there's examples of these 8 here in the room. Oh yeah, and then so one of I mentioned the Legend of the Great Stupa. Another book that's amazing is Betty Cook, late Betty Cook, colleague, an incredible scholar, and she compiled this book, which is called the Stupa, the Sacred Symbol of Enlightenment. It is Crystal Mirror 12, and it is quite exhaustive, and it includes a translation of of some, I'm not going to read all of it, it's too long, but just some verses that pertain to circumambulating a stupa. And so that's one of the, like I say, we can do prostrations in the presence of the stupa, make offerings. Another thing to do is to circle, go around, keeping the sacred object to you on your right shoulder, and you go around clockwise. Yeah. And so it says here, this is a translation of a Tibetan text. Homage to the three jewels. After the Buddha, the one of great wisdom, had turned the Dharma wheel of the world, the wise one Shariputra humbly asked, "What are the results that come from circumambulating a stupa? May the guide of the supreme universe of this great kalpa please advise." Perfect Buddha, supreme among the two-legged beings, the enlightened one, granted this reply. I will indicate a few of the qualities gained from circumambulating stupas. When you circumambulate a stupa, you will be honored by gods, nagas, yakshas, gandharvas, asuras, garudas, kanaras, and maharogas. Once you gain the leisure so very rare and circumambulate a stupa for even a short time, the 8 adverse states will be no more. Circumambulating a stupa will have this result: mindfulness, clear perception, radiant appearance, and intelligence, and you will be honored everywhere. Circumambulating a stupa will have this result: a very long life, a lifetime more than that of a god, in which you will attain great renown. Circumambulating a stupa will have this result: rebirth in Jambaling in a family, a worthy line, and a virtuous mind. Circumambulating a stupa will have this result: you will be pure as the snow, you will be good, radiant, and wise, and you will lead a happy life. And on it goes, you know. It's again re-emphasizing what I was trying to talk about earlier, this the interaction of us as a practitioner and us bringing to the stupa or the sacred symbol our openness, and this incredible karmic dynamic, I guess, is the only way I can express it. And so it's widely known here in Berkeley, at least in the Nyingma Institute circles, that our stupa is returning. And so I'm sharing this photograph of the near completion of a stupa that will be arriving, presumably, between now and the end of the year. We had a stupa back there for many years. Arno Maitland, the prior dean, had helped create a stupa back there, but the materials that were used just didn't withstand the elements. This one will outlast us all. It is solid, or not solid, but it is cast in bronze. So it will effectively forever be back there. And so we're pretty excited about that. And that's actually sort of the inspiration of wanting to do a talk about the stupa, was this notion of getting a stupa back. I also mentioned that there are many things to read further. I really do strongly encourage engaging the legend of the Great Stupa. There's also a book by Lama Govinda called The Psychocosmic Symbolism of the Buddha Stupa. Then there's a very large, or almost picture-size, tabletop book called The Light of the Valley, which is Sering and Arno Pema Mainland's account of the renovation and renewal of the Swayambhanath Stupa. Many photographs detailing all of the processes that they went through to restore the Swayambhanath Stupa. And then, as I mentioned, Christian 12 by Betty Cook, the sacred symbol of enlightenment. I don't know where. I just wanted to share a couple of other stories. Again, sort of this sort of magical aspect I really should go back to the swine, to the Bodhana Stupa for this, back in Nepal. Here at the Nyingma Institute, our main lineage of practice is what is called the Longchen Nyingtik tradition of the Nyingma. And this is a Terma cycle of teachings that was revealed by a great master, Jime Lingpa, in the 1700s, 18th century. And just a little bit of the accounts, this was basically a visionary transmission that happened for him, many different visions whereby the teachings came to him. This is an account of just one of them. This is as recounted by Dilgo Kensei here. And tormented by sorrow, I wept. This is Jime Lingpa talking. And just at that moment, the air around me filled with light, and suddenly, standing before me, I beheld a beautiful white snow lioness. I took my seat upon her back, and we leaped into the limitless immensity of the sky. And soon we arrived at Jarun Kashor, the great stupa of Nepal. And there, on the eastern side of the stupa, stood the Dakini of Dharmakaya wisdom. She handed me a sealed flat wooden casket and said, "For those with pure perception, you are King Chisong Detsen. For those whose perception is less pure, you are Senge Repa, the cotton-clad lion yogi. Here is the heart treasure of Samantabhadra, the symbol of the infinite mind of the Vidyadhara Padmasambhava, the great secret treasure of the Dakinis." Having spoken thus, the Dakini vanished, leaving me quite shaken. Then, filled with great joy, I opened the casket, and within I found 5 scrolls of yellow parchment and 7 small crystals the size of a pea. As I unrolled the largest of the scrolls, the air was suffused with an indescribable fragrance of medicinal herbs and camphor, and my entire being seemed to quiver with the mystery of it. A thought, unbidden, made itself clear in my mind. Rahula protects this treasure. It is extremely powerful and should be approached with great caution. With reverence and awe, I slowly unfurled the scroll. It bore the image of a stupa, completely covered with Dakini script, seemingly beyond the reach of human understanding. Unable to decipher it, I began to roll the parchment closed again, when suddenly, like a mirage, the stupa disappeared and the Dakini script dissolved and reformed into Tibetan script. It was a text on the great compassion of one, Avalokiteshvara. The entire text arose as clearly as if it were an image in a mirror. After some time, it again grew difficult to read, becoming progressively less clear. So that is to say, in this visionary experience Jime Lingpa had, the setting is the Bodhana Stupa. The Terma treasure revelation itself is script in the form of a stupa, which you can't read, and then it dissolves into Tibetan. You can scribe it down for the benefit of the rest of us. So that is to say, that the stupa just sits right in there, right in there, right? It's just like nestled in the transmission of the enlightened lineage, particularly the lineage of teachings that we follow here at the Institute that Rinpoche is his main practice of the Longchen Nyingtik. Again, just totally bound up, that the stupa is just, it was the environment where the transmission occurred, and the transmission itself took the form of the stupa for a few moments, and then resolved into. So it's just really something. What else do I want to say? In terms of practices, like when, I don't know, I have no idea. Everything takes longer than it should. But let's say, by the first of next year, the stupa is there in the back garden. Rinpoche, this pertains to the Odeon stupa, but it applies to any. And these are guidelines for practice. It says, when approaching the stupa with reverence, take refuge and pray, make offerings, All of this brings great merit. These virtuous acts will protect against negative karma and hasten success on the spiritual path. Please dedicate the merit of your practice of the stupa to your parents and to the longevity of the Dharma in this universe. Prostrations. When you first approach the stupa, it is traditional to perform 3 prostrations. If you wish, you may recite or chant the refuge prayers at this time. Offerings. After paying homage to the stupa, incense may be lighted and placed in one of the incense bowls, while flowers may be put in bowls or in vases that surround the stupa. Donations. Traditional gestures of appreciation for monuments that have spiritual significance. Donations help cover utilities and maintenance costs of the prayer wheels, gardens, and gold leaf for refreshing the stupa's exterior. So, this gold leaf enlightenment stupa, gold leaf, which is great, but it's out there on the snow coast. It gets hammered. It gets the sea breezes, salt air, it blows in strong, and the rains, sometimes even snow, comes in strong. And so, the gold leaf needs to be replenished, so the donations go to that, and so it's an important, it's kind of mundane, but it's kind of not. If you wish to make a donation, a receptacle is provided. Circumambulation, I talked about that a little bit. Circumambulating within the spiritual field of temples and stupas is healing and restorative. This traditional practice eases the mind and prepares it for meditation. You want to be mindful when you're doing the circumambulation to try to avoid stepping on insects. And then after circumambulation, then meditation is very appropriate. Meditate and pray in accordance with your own wishes and customs. Benches and so forth for that. And then at the conclusion, to make a dedication of merit, to share the merits and blessings of visiting the stupa by inwardly dedicating them to others, dedicating it to your parents or to all sentient beings or both. And then he also suggests closing prostration. Open with prostrations, then you close with prostrations. He says, as a gesture of respect and devotion, you may wish to perform 3 final prostrations before leaving the stupa. This closing gesture is also an indication of your intention to return, either physically or vicariously through meditation. Sometimes I do that right before I go to sleep. Visualize the stupa. I visualize myself flying, circumambulating the Enlightenment stupa right before going to bed. It's very nice. You don't have to buy any gas or anything. So that's pretty much it. I'm try to respond to any questions. Yes.
I'll try to remember all of them. They're kind of accumulating. A prostration has the individual go completely flat on the ground, or can you be in a kneeling position?
There's like 3 kind of prostrations, for those who are old and rickety, we just bow at the waist. We join our hands, in reverence, and we just sort of genuflect, because that's about what our hips and knees can do, And then there's sort of a kind of what we call half prostrations, where you go down and your knees touch the ground, and your palms touch the ground, and your forehead touches. And then the third kind of prostration, which is most meritorious, is the full prostration, where you in fact do fully stretch out on your belly and chest, stretch out fully. And then come back up. So the prostration, again, so I was talking about the practice of offerings, as Bodhisattva practice. Also, the prostration of homage or making prostrations. These are the 7 main practices that you see in the Samantabhadra's prayer for enlightened practice.
question.
Sure.
Someone else. The satsa
Yeah.
here, when you said that these fill the one of the stupas, it's filled with these. So that is not visible.
That's right.
And where it is put in, and then is it permanently closed? And you just know that they are there?
There's a lot of that. Of, you know, there's usually like one here at the Odeon Stupa. Even the people that live there and have lived there for decades, very few of them have ever been inside. You know, they do all of their ceremonial things outside. They circumambulate outside. There is one door. Sometimes Rinpoche goes in there. And sometimes the person who is responsible for taking care of the stupa will go in there. But generally speaking, there are, there's like sort of the Russian dolls, you know, where things are nestled and nestled and nestled and nestled. You know, like, because we're talking about putting, you know, a tsatsa inside a stupa and then the stupa is closed up and you never see it. Well, inside the stupa itself, like I was talking about earlier, you know, you have these relics of Dzogchen Shakyamuni, you know, his robe, and other things from Padmasambhava and Yeshe Tsogyal. You also have a mantra roll of mantras and prayers. Was actually printed on microfilms. There's zillions of things inside that you never see. And then at the bottom, there are crushed semi-precious stones as sort of a symbolic representation of material wealth. So it's both, you know, material wealth and spiritual wealth in spades. I mean, it's just, you know, incredible. And so, like I say, the contents that are inside the satsa, you'll never see. The satsa is put inside the stupa, you'll never see. You know what I mean? You just know that it's there. And it is. And it carries a certain power. And that's just part of the. I saw something the other day that talked about Vajrayana practice and said, at some point it's helpful, just don't try to figure it out. That was the advice. Don't try to figure it out. You know, there's all sorts of things happening, you know, with this that are beyond rational mind, beyond rational understanding, and sometimes intentionally so. I think this is part of that. And it's like, what do you mean we don't get to see it? It kind of it sort of refutes that kind of aggression that we have. I want to know absolutely everything. I need to know. I need to see the inside. No, you don't. You're just fine. You know, but there's a generally speaking, wanting to know, wanting to see is a really good thing. But there are times when actually it's an expression of a craving or sort of an aggressive mind state that I think is part of, I don't know. I'm just kind of riffing here a little bit. But that it's okay to not know. Yes, Olivia.
Well, I find that it can exercise a leap of faith.
Yeah.
Well, also, it's like in this modern kind of reductive and scientific era, people have gotten so accustomed to kind of things, answers for things that, you know, in pre-modern era, it was sort of taken for given that there was like a form of mystery to the world and all that.
Yeah. And there, Yeah, the leap of faith and the preserving the sense of mystery. That's what I was trying to kind of allude to at the beginning, that to approaching um, this field of knowledge or this field of awareness um, is to open up a certain kind of loose quality, uh, because the stupa, a fully empowered stupa like this, like the Odeon stupa here, um, it, how shall I say? On the one hand, it has a sort of magnetizing power from, one might say, spiritual forces from deep, deep space, I mean, really deep space. It also has so it has this magnetizing quality. It also has this sort of broadcasting quality to it, because like I was saying, in the Odeon Stupa in particular, it has this prayer wheel in the middle of it that is turning 24/7, broadcasting mantras out into space for the benefit of all of us, to stabilize the elements of the world, um, to prevent natural disasters, to stabilize the mind, those of us who live in these very challenging times, where, increasingly, as you say, we have all sorts of sort of technical prowess, and we're using things that we don't even understand. I'm speaking as one who bought a smartphone just last year. Some people understand these things a lot better than I do, but that we live in very destabilizing times, and very violent times, and I feel that and Rinpoche, of course, Dr. Rinpoche, who went through the great trauma of seeing all of his lineage masters um, put to death during the communist Chinese takeover and the Cultural Revolution, and the basic destruction of culture and land. Um, you know, for him, this is. I mean, we all live with this certain level of anxiety of annihilation could be just around the corner. Either just by incinerating the planet, like what's going on in Oregon and Washington and Western Canada right now. That's maybe our lot, for generations to come until something turns around. And of course, there's the nuclear threat and many other things. Through COVID, I just saw something on the news that talked about some sort of new virus that AI had created. That made me feel great, So there is a role to play. The stupas and these sacred traditional elements have a tremendous power, and the need for that power, and the need for us in our limited ways, within whatever capacities of mind we might have, to activate the spiritual power and blessings of these things, is, one could say, rather dire. And to ignore these possibilities to create peace, both in the environment, and in the minds of our leaders, and in our own minds. Those of us who have some insight into this power have a kind of, I feel, a certain special responsibility to do what we can to activate, as the Stupa encodes, the four immeasurable qualities of love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. Do our best to activate those consciously. I just saw something, the Dalai Lama was talking. He says, the first thing I do when I wake up is I meditate on compassion. Yeah, good idea. To meditate on loving kindness and compassion, first thing, right out of the box. Yes, I mean, we really need it. And I think Rinpoche has been very much aware of that chaos and those tendencies, and everything in his power, and has empowered us, his students, to do what we can. Yeah, there are, and there are aspects that are hard to speak of. I can just say that within my limited bandwidth, I have seen at Orion emanations of light from deep space, magnetized, come to rest there. I can't explain it. So the Tibetan tradition got carried, initiated, of course, by the Buddha, but then carried on and then refined over centuries. Has a spiritual sort of technology, if you will, that is very, very powerful. Stupas are really a big, big part of it. And so they create a zone of peace, you know, and a zone where that parasol in the times of distress and chaos, no doubt, will come. Like I say, we all made it through COVID, but not everybody did. And the next one might be 3 times as worse. Who knows? But it's coming. Some god awful thing. You can pretty much bank on it. And so, knowing what to do. Okay, well, I'll go to a stupa and I will practice and I will pray and I will, do what I can. But we need that sense of protection and refuge. Anyway, sorry. Go on. Anything else?
Mark? Is there anything you can say about the stupa at Ratnaling?
Okay, yeah. So there is a stupa at Ratnaling. It's more sort of human scale, right? It's, I don't know, 10, 12 feet tall, maybe. I can't really say too much, actually, about it in terms of, whether, something unique about that one. I'm sorry. You might have, I don't know who was like involved with that particular stupa.
Okay, thank you.
I want to track those people down.
Hey, Mark, some of the stupas have 2 eyes on 4 sides. What do those eyes represent?
Oh, yeah, that's very much in the Nepali style, right? Eyes, right? And this one's actually in Tibet, but and you see that in both the here's the Bodhnath one that has the eyes, and the I think the Swayambhanath Stupa as well. I didn't read anything for tonight's talk. I can just speculate. The eyes, awaken knowledge, eyes open. It's interesting because I'm just looking at this. It is. It also evokes a certain kind of curious sense of awakened on the other side. If the other side is looking at you, you're not just looking at the other side is looking at you.
Gives a very omniscient vibe.
Yeah, very omniscient vibe. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that there's an open knowledge quality or open field of knowledge that is not necessarily rooted in the subject. Okay, well, we've gone over time, so let's dedicate the merit. Jean-Paul Pao Jitar Kempa Kunta Zanko Deang Devjite Data Kunji Jesu Dagojir Kewa Didak Tamche Ratu.
No.
So anyway, thank you very much. Oh, and just lastly, again, just these resources, and here, just remind you guys
Thank
that
you.
there is some reading to do. See that the Legend of the Great Stupa, and particularly Christopher 12, but all of them. These are all Dharma publishing books, as I recall. Okay. Thank you all very much.